Why do these two look different? Even though I hadn't written any CSS. Well, there's still CSS, however, I cannot see it yet. You would assume that since we haven't written any CSS, a web page will be starting from blank and there would be no CSS applied. However, if we just zoom in a little, we would be able to see a lot of CSS styles injected by browser before your web page even loads. If we just zoom in a little on why this button looks pressable, we would be able to see a variety of different CSS styles applied by the browser or more formally by user agent stylesheet. In this video, we shall be discussing about inheritance and browser styles, two of the most ignored topics in CSS, and after this video, your CSS is never going to break randomly and it's always going to work identically well on all different browsers. Before we explore it further, it's important to understand from where exactly this extra CSS is coming from. Well, whenever we make a new website, its CSS is defined by three things, only one of which we're exactly writing. The first one are browser styles. Every time we write a new web page, some CSS is injected by the browser and it's loaded before your CSS is even requested. Every time you download a browser, maybe you have downloaded Chrome, maybe you have downloaded Firefox, it's going to come with a style sheet called user agent style sheet and it's going to be loaded automatically in every web page. Let me explain why browsers do this, but the second thing CSS is shaped by are inherited styles. And we have already seen an example. If we go and change the font family on our body tag, the entire page is going to have a new font even though we didn't change all the tags. We just changed the body tags and the font on all the different tags changed automatically. And this happens because of inherited styles. We are going to explore it further, don't worry about it yet. And last but not least, we have explicit styles, which are the styles you actually write to override the CSS. The browser styles and the inherited styles are done automatically. Inherited styles are not written by you, but they are mostly driven by your explicit styles. And the explicit styles are written directly by you. So let's understand the browser styles first. Every time we write a new web page, let's consider that we wrote a new web page by adding a doctype HTML and a HTML tag, and then we went ahead and written, we wrote h1, this is our heading, and then we wrote p, this is our article or paragraph or whatever. And once we load this web page into a browser, our h1 is going to appear with a much larger font and with a bold font style. However, a p tag is not going to appear with those fonts. And this happens because consider that we don't want to write the CSS for h1, h2, h3, h4 and so on, and we just want to make a plain simple HTML page. Once we are going to open that HTML page, we are going to see exactly the same thing. H1 is going to appear with no additional fonts. It's going to appear just like a paragraph, and paragraph is, well, it's going to appear like a paragraph. And now the developer had to go on and write the CSS to make the H1 larger, to make the button clickable, to make the links distinguishable, and they would have to write the CSS for every tag they are going to use in their web page. Therefore, the browsers came up with a solution. Every time we download a browser, It comes with a preloaded style sheet called user agent style sheet. And this style sheet is going to define the default styles before we write any CSS. And it's important to know because even though those styles are very similar, you're going to write the same CSS for Chrome, for Firefox, for Opera, and then you open your browser and it's going to appear similar. But those styles aren't identical. There might be a few changes. In fact, I am going to show you an example right now. So here I have a very simple web page that shows an email input and then a submit button. I have it opened in Microsoft Edge and now I am going to open it in another browser by using Browser Stack, which basically allows me to open many different browsers and test my website without having to install every one of them. You would be able to note a clear difference. Our button is completely different. Our input is a lot more rounded and the text is much more readable compared to this with a lot more spacing. And iOS does this by default. However, if we want all our web pages to look exactly the same on all browsers, we would have to normalize our web page. Basically, in order to make our CSS look similar on all browsers, we have two options. Either we can normalize our CSS or we can reset our CSS. Reset is basically resetting all our styles, the styles inherited by the browser to default, and then writing the CSS for every single tag by ourselves. This is feasible in some cases, however, it's very rare, so I'm not going to go into that. But we are going to look at how to normalize a web page, and basically, normalizing a CSS means applying some styles so our web page looks completely identical on all browsers. The concept is very simple. We have something called normalize.css and we are going to use that to normalize our CSS for our web page. You simply need to search normalize.css on any browser. Once you find these links, you need to open the GitHub one. And basically, to normalize a web page, we need to search for normalize.css CDN. And then you need to click the CDN.js link. Here it shows three different options. We need to stick with the latest version and in front of normalize.min.css we are going to click this copy link tag button. And after clicking that, I am going to go back, go to the end of the head tag and then paste. And this is going to paste a very large link tag like this. You might remember that we use link tag to load CSS from different files. We are doing exactly that and we're just downloading a file from internet instead of writing that file by ourselves. And we shall discuss CDNs later, but let's check out the result. It doesn't show a lot of difference here, but if I go back and then load something on Safari, let's go here, load the Safari browser, and then if we look at it, it's still going to appear different. Because, well, iOS does some things by default, you cannot change it. Like that submit button here, you cannot make it more square like this. However, you can certainly write your own CSS to perform those changes by yourself. If I go to a desktop browser, however, instead of an iPhone browser, it would appear completely identical. But one more thing that you need to understand is that the purpose of normalization is not to make the styles look exactly similar on all browsers. It is to make the styles look similar and reasonable on all browsers. If you are normalizing your web page, your website might appear slightly different on some different browsers, but it's always going to appear similar and it's always going to appear readable and reasonable no matter which browser you're using. Now we are done with browser styles. We know that we can use normalization to make our web pages look similar and reasonable on all different browsers. However, it's time to learn about our second topic, which is CSS inheritance. Let's consider that I write this code. Before I apply any style, let's go back. And this is a very simple web page we have written with a single paragraph. I am going to target the body tag and add a color which is blue. And once I go back to our browser, oops, sorry, our paragraph has become blue, even though we didn't target our p tag. Let's try adding an a tag within it, and I am going to say a link. And let's go back, and the color of our link hasn't changed. Our paragraph is blue, but our link is still dark blue or something. It's not blue like we have specified on our body. And if I do another tag like an I tag and I write an I tag and we go back, this one is blue. The idea is pretty simple. Every time we apply a style on a tag, it's going to inherit to all of its children. However, not every style is going to inherit and not every tag is going to inherit every style. So the question is, what exactly is going to inherit? First of all, everything that defines how the text looks is going to inherit. We have our text color, we have font size, we have font family. All of those are going to inherit. However, things like background color and width and height, all of them are not going to inherit. There's something interesting about background color. If I add a background color, since the entire body is red, it will look like that this is inherited on a paragraph. However, it's not actually inherited. Our body is just red and our paragraph is on the body. If I go back now and I add something like with 50% and let me add a border so we can see it clearly. Border 1px solid black, and now you can see that our body inherits until this point, not inherits, sorry, our body cuts off at this point. And now if I inspect this I tag, you can see that this width is not inherited. You can tell from its color this border is not inherited, it also appears disabled, but this color is inherited. Now if I do background color, let's do background color red and I go back. Now it has a background color because its color is transparent and the entire body behind it is red. But you can look here and you will know that background color is also not inherited. The idea is pretty simple. Just consider that everything that defines how the text looks, whether it's font color, whether it's font family, whether it's font size, is going to be inherited, while everything that defines anything else is not going to be inherited. Or you can just think whether it's sensible to inherit it. If we define a font family on a body tag, we obviously want our entire website to have that font family. But if we maybe cut our website into half our page, we don't want every element to take up 50% width and be cut in half. But what about this A tag? Well, this one is rather interesting. You can see that it's inherited, but it's been cut through. The browser is telling us that it's not going to apply this style. Instead, it's going to apply this style. And this is pretty simple. This is simply because our user agent style sheet comes before our inheritance. If I go ahead and apply an style like a color, let's say orange, our link becomes orange red because we targeted directly. But if styles are inherited, the browser agent style sheet is going to come first. Things like colors, borders, etc., which are added by the browser without writing any CSS, are not going to be inherited. Let's take another example. I am going to add a button and let's say click me. We are going to go back and this is not inherited because we can see the color is overridden by the browser. If we look here, the browser has defined its own color, and in order to override it, we need to target button, and then we can override it and define our own color like color red. The same goes for other stuff like background color and outline, which is added by the browser, and the browser is going to manage that for us. Now to recap everything, there are just a few points that you need to remember. First of all, browser CSS is added by the browser automatically. Every browser that you use, whether it's Google Chrome, whether it's Firefox, is going to add their own CSS so plain HTML pages look good. And it's similar between browsers but not identical. We are usually not attempting to make that identical because if we have Android users, we would want to give them a slightly different experience so they can use the website easily on mobile. But we want the entire website to be consistent. Therefore, we can use normalize.css to ensure that everything is consistent and our website is not broken on any browser. Next, we have inheritance, which is basically inheritance of style from parent tags, like applying some style on body tag and then having your entire website inherit that style. The simplest idea to remember what inherits and what doesn't is to memorize this sentence. Text appearance usually inherits. Whether it's text color, whether it's text size, whether it's text family, font family, it's going to inherit. And things like background color, like shape, like transform, those are all advanced CSS tags. Those are not going to inherit. Next, if we have default browser styles like on H1, those will come first. So if we specify font size equals to 16 pixel on body, our headings are still going to be large because browser styles come before our inherited styles. And last, we have an example. If we consider that we want to give our entire website a different font, we simply need to specify that style on our body and our entire website is going to have that font automatically.